The three-day terrorist siege of Mumbai in India about 3 months ago killed almost 200 people. The terrorists who perpetrated that attack are believed to be associated with an organization based in Pakistan. Today, some very scary news from Pakistan, from the city of Lahore, which is normally known for its arts and culture, but where today what appears to be a Mumbai copycat attack took place in broad daylight. About a dozen heavily armed young gunmen attacked a convoy that was carrying the Sri Lankan cricket team. The Associated Press says the attack killed 8 people, 6 of whom were Pakistani police that were escorting that team. 6 members of the Sri Lankan team and a British coach were wounded in the attack. The Sri Lankan team was in Pakistan because after the Mumbai attack in November, the Indian cricket team dropped out. The attack in Pakistan comes as the Obama administration is making unprecedented attempts to reach out to the Muslim world. President Obama's aides say that he will give a major foreign policy speech in an Islamic country within his first 100 days. You'll recall also that the president gave his first formal TV interview after taking office to an Arabic language channel, Al Arabiya. He also sent his popular Secretary of State to Southeast Asia, including the world's most populous Muslim country, Indonesia. That was on her first overseas visit. And today, after attending a conference in Egypt where she reaffirmed the U.S. position in favor of a two-state solution for Israel and the Palestinians, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is in Israel. Now, awkwardly, Israel doesn't really have a government right now. Its new prime minister will be its old prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. Mr. Netanyahu is still forming a government. He has, shall we say, a delicate relationship with the Clintons.
Handshake, please. Yes.
In other words, they had to be told to shake hands. Oops! Secretary Clinton's message on this trip is that the U.S. is reversing George W. Bush's policy of plugging its ears and going la 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 la, and instead is sending diplomats to talk with the nation of Syria. Now, NBC's chief foreign affairs correspondent Andrea Mitchell is traveling with Secretary Clinton. She spoke with the secretary about the change in policy.
You're sending 2 diplomats to Syria. It's the first time in 4 years. Why now?
I think it's important that our 2 diplomats, one from the State Department, one from the White House, stop in Damascus to personally convey to the government the extent of our concerns.
Joining us now is NBC News chief foreign affairs correspondent Andrea Mitchell, who is live in Jerusalem. Good evening, Andrea. Thanks for joining us.
You bet. My pleasure.
What is the administration expecting about this, the prospects of diplomacy with Syria, and how much of a change is this from the Bush administration?
It's a big change, Rachel. What they are doing is reopening talks with Syria for the first time in 4 years. Those talks were canceled, all diplomacy canceled with Syria after the Bush White House, probably correctly, blamed Syria for the assassination of Rafiq Hariri, the Prime Minister of Lebanon. That said, the Obama administration thinks that Syria is the best route, the road to Damascus being the road through which all diplomacy in the Middle East will rest, and that, in fact, with no government in Israel and with a weak Palestinian leadership, the divisions that you know of, Hamas and Fatah, and the war going on in Gaza, that, in fact, getting Syria on board is probably the most hopeful thing that they can do. And John Kerry was there last week sort of working on this, making it, sort of easing the way with Bashir Assad, the president of Syria, and now they're taking the next step, and it's a really significant one.
What is it like traveling with Secretary Clinton in Israel and in the Middle East right now? If the Middle East, if the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is potentially ever going to get resolved, this might be one of the best chances ever at the start of the Obama administration. But how's she being received in Israel?
Well, they love her in Israel because she is a Clinton. And you know how Bill Clinton had this very, very close relationship with Rabin, who he really revered almost as a father figure. Clinton is very popular here. Hillary Clinton, very popular here. They came here together for the Saban Forum in 2005 with Chelsea. They spent a lot of time here over the years. And so she's being very very well received. But there is going to be tension. There already was, I think, with Bibi Netanyahu, the designated prime minister who can't form a government, and so far it looks as though he's going to have to go to the right-wing parties to form that government. So it will not be a centrist government. And while she says over and over again that we believe that a two-state solution is inevitable and inescapable, is her language, he is not persuaded. So while the Netanyahu government might have back-channel talks with Syria, they have before, it is going to be really pulling and, dragging him over the finish line here, if there is going to be a finish line. And his government may not last that long because the Israeli people really are more in line with what the U.S. wants right now than presumably what Netanyahu wants. They do want an end to this. People are just weary of it.
Andrea, for so long we've thought about the center of the potential resolution between the West and the Middle East, the whole relationship between the West and the Muslim world. We thought of the center of gravity there as being the Israel-Palestinian conflict. I wonder if you sense that the Obama administration still views the center of gravity in the Muslim world as Israel and Palestine, or is it possibly the crisis in South Asia, the crisis in Pakistan, that's starting to really rise in terms of importance, in terms of what the Muslim world is paying attention to and what our relationship is with Muslims around the world?
Oh, I think it's definitely AFPAC, the way they would call it. It's Richard Holbrooke's agenda. It's that part of the world. It's nuclear. It is on a hair trigger, and we saw in Lahore today exactly how little control there is over civil society, over law and order in Pakistan, the rise of the Taliban, the fact that they're sending more troops to Afghanistan, and even though, we're talking about a very small number of troops for a country the size of Afghanistan, a mission yet to be determined. That is the key to it all. That said, they can't ignore the Middle East, but there is really nothing happening here on the ground that would make it the right time to till this soil. You've got a weak Palestinian leadership, you've got Hamas resurgent, and divisions in Gaza, bloodshed there, continued rocketing, so that they can't really press hard for Israel to open those borders as hard as they would like to intellectually, because there still is rocketing, and so Israel can still justifiably insist on its right to defend itself. So they've got no moral, political leverage right now on the Israeli-Palestinian front, and as you've pointed out, no government. And with that said, the best route they think is through Syria and through trying to pressure Iran through Russia. That was the other really significant thing today. The signals from the White House and the State Department that they are willing to give up missile defense in Eastern Europe. Who would have thought it? And give that up as a trade-off. They'll say it isn't a quid pro quo, but that's exactly what was laid out. And they're talking about enticing the Russians back into the game, getting the Russians to pressure Iran. That's a big deal. That's warming up the Russian relationship.
Wow, it just seems like the closer attention you pay to what's going on in foreign policy, the more you realize what a big change has happened between these two administrations. Andrea Mitchell, NBC News Chief Foreign Affairs Correspondent, thank you so much. Congratulations on that interview with Hillary Clinton.